both of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander, and such great names as these. But of all...
Hello and welcome to today's Battlemech review. Today we're going to look at a mech that a lot of you have probably seen, or at least piloted even, knowing that it's the standard trainer that has been used in many military academies and in various Sibcos over the entire human-controlled space. The Chameleon has been in production for close to 650 years by now, and with very few stoppage in production, it always has been around to give us a nice little ride to learn how to pilot mechs. In my case, I never really messed with the Chameleon outside of using it in the yard here. I was trained on an adder and on an archer instead. But that's just how family with a decent amount of mechs usually go. You learn on what is available. The Chameleon is not the best fighting mech out there, but it is able to do a decent job when pushed into service, and it can help out new pilots to figure out how you should actually fight in a mech in its category. So let's get into it. Training people to pilot and fight in Battlemechs is actually a whole lot of work. You can probably get into it and learn how to pilot an industrial mech in a couple of months, maybe a year, if you want to be decently efficient at it. If you want to be able to fight in it, though, it's going to take you a significant amount of time. Most people will be spending between 3 to 6 years in order to know how to properly pilot a mech. It depends on which academy you go to, if you're learning from your dad like I did, or if you're learning from a Sibco commander. There's all sorts of different ways of teaching people how to be a Mechwarrior. Some people are better at it in general, but even if you get the basic training and get thrown into the fight, generally you'll learn that you're just not good enough to be able to do very efficient things. The 3 to 6 years window is generally what you will see most people survive with. The clans like to stick people in various Sibcos and start training them from a very young age, but of course in that particular period you have all the other bits of education that need to go through. So you do need to teach them how to read, write. You need to teach them how to have a basic empathy and basic polite society situation kind of things, even though the clans are a little bit weird by that. The Inner Sphere generally will give you, like, your basic education, and then you'll go to a military academy where you'll learn the ropes of what you're supposed to do. So in order to get people to actually learn how to pilot your mechs, well, you do need various trainer mechs. Actual military academies will have a set of battle mechs made for training roles. Generally, you're going to have a whole lot of stingers. Stingers are cheap, they're easy to fix, they're easy to maintain, and they're plentiful. So it's a very common mech in that particular category. You're going to see a whole lot of people use wasps as well, another very common mech in the same kind of category as the stinger. Might be able to teach people how to use SRMs as well, not a bad thing. Locusts are a little bit rarer in terms of being trainers because they have a more specialized role and they're a bit special. And you're going to have various regional differences. You're going to have a lot of commandos as trainers in Lyran Space, as an example. Or if you're in Fedson Space, you're going to see a whole lot of Valkyries. The Star League's dedicated trainer was technically the Crockett, but the mech was so good that it was always pressed into combat rather than being kept as a trainer. So, that's an odd situation. The clans have a whole variety of things. You're going to see a whole lot of people having trained on 2C models. Older clan mechs also being used. Things like, a refurbished Griffin with some clan equipment mounted on it. Things like that. It varies quite a bit. But originally, the first through training battle mech was the Chameleon, and it's the one that a whole lot of people remember in that particular role. You have a couple 3DOs, and you have got a couple of shows here about people piloting Chameleons. It's a common thing, and it's common enough that a lot of various studios have at least 1 or 2 Chameleon on hand when they're trying to record shows. It was mass-produced by Defiance Industries, one of the biggest companies in the Inner Sphere since 2510. And with how it was set up, it basically was as simple as one can get to get some people to learn. It's not meant for direct engagement. It has a simplified command console, so an actual Mechwarrior sitting in it might be a little bit confused by it because it automates a lot of things that is you have to sometimes do manually in a regular combat mech. You've got some people that modify the command console for their chameleons when they're really going to be pushed into service, but it's a little bit of an odd duck for that. If you look at the mechs that came before it, basically, if you wanted to train before that, you probably would be training on a thing like the Mackie or, your standard Stingers and Wasps. The Chameleon was very dedicated in its particular niche, and people really appreciated it, and that made Defiance a whole lot of money. Strangely enough, the production of the Chameleon was altered by Defiance in 3052. They basically took the production line and started building new night skies instead. What you had, though, was a Gillian Sullivan at JB Battlemech, which decided to buy the rights to produce the Chameleon and kept the production up on a plant on Storeforce. JB Battlemech had quite a few financial ups and downs over the year, including a nasty bout of jihadism during the Word of Blake Jihad, which basically bought the company from underneath previous ownership. It went sideways, but the production of the Chameleon kept going. Even with all their financial and commercial issues, JB was able to keep the production of the Chameleon up at Storeforce and on various satellite offices that were not being as controlled by the jihadis as the jihadis would have wanted. Those secondary facilities were basically shuttered by the Word of Blake, but people find ways fairly quickly to keep building mech parts so they can keep making money. Really, this basically makes the Chameleon one of the very rare machines that has been in production for about 6 centuries with no major changes, no major stoppage in production, outside of, a couple of months, not even a year, I would say. It is quite surprising, and you will see quite a few of them. It's not the most common mech out there, but a lot of people will have seen a couple in their lives, at least in 3D shows. Your original Chameleon was the TRC series. The more modern ones have a different production code, but now they basically share this exact same specs. And this one has been in production since the 2510s. At 50 tons, it uses the most common engine of the time, a Vlar 300, giving you a top speed of about 97 kilometers per hour. You get 3 tons of jump jet equipment from McLeod Special, which gives you 180 lift capacity, which is a very decent, and will teach pilots how to do all sorts of maneuvers. Everything else on it is bog standard, standard chassis, standard armor, standard engine, standard heat sinks. Nothing fancy, but it was still more fancy than a lot of mechs that were in production by the 2510s, because you still had quite a few of those primitive machines floating around. The biggest difference was the simplified cockpit for trainees. You have 6 tons of standard plates, which is more than enough for a regular training duty, but of course it has a really critically thin back armor, and you just don't get into a fight with it because it's not meant to do that. The weapon suite on a Chameleon is actually quite massive for a mech meant for training, but it really exists so people can learn range bracket, targeting, and heat management. Your main gun is that big gun-mounted Cyclops Eye large laser, which is actually quite a fancy gun. Cyclops Eye actually makes one of the better large lasers out there. It's just not one of the most common one. Each of the underarm mounts an intact medium laser, which is a very basic model. It has a lot of simple connectors. You can replace it with most other medium lasers with very little issues. Your side torsos each mount a pair of Defiance B3S small lasers, and finally in the center torso you've got 2 scattergun machine guns in order to teach you how to use machine guns basically. One of the problem though is that you do carry a whole lot of ammo and a whole lot of energy weapons, so a trainee that is quite dumb might blow up his own mech using all the lasers all the time because you only have 10 standard heat sinks to try to keep you running. I understand why the machine guns are there. It really is a training tool, but I am not a huge fan of it, and I have seen quite a few different people, when people start piloting the Chameleon for training, have the machine gun ammo simply taken out, so you don't have accidental explosions. The sheer amount of chameleons out there did mean that the former SLDF had a decent chunk of them when they turned into the clans. Your basic TRC model was generally used for basic training of people, but over time, a Chameleon C was introduced with some basic clan technology. The engine uses double heatsinks because most clan-rated 300 engines have, just double heatsinks built into them. So it's not even a case of we're trying to build something a little bit more fancy, whatever. It's just we're using the parts that we have. The large and medium lasers are replaced with ER versions, while the small lasers are replaced with a pair of small pulse laser. The armor is thickened up by about a ton, and it's replaced with ferrofibrous, which is once again something that was more common to use in the general area than standard plates. Overall, it's a great trainer. It would actually be a great combat mech as well. But then again, it's still used by Sibcos for people to learn how to use the basic stuff a inner sphere chameleon would teach you to do. Your more modern chameleon is the CLN-7V, which has been built by JB Battlemechs and quite a few subsidiaries and side hustles, basically. Not much has changed on the design outside of the armor being tightened up by about a ton, increasing the rear armor significantly. To make room for this, you take out a small laser and half a ton of machine gun ammo, which is not a bad thing. I honestly think you could take out another small laser to toughen up the hide a little bit, and you will see a number of them sporting double heatsinks rather than single heatsinks because of a simple fact. Once again, 300 rated engines are more commonly built with double heatsinks nowadays, so when you import them to stick them on your Chameleon, well, they're gonna have double heatsinks built in rather than standards. This is not a design spec. This is more of a this is what happens because that's what parts we have kind of spec. JB was happy to make the trainer, but they wanted to make even more money. That's how businesses work. In 3058, they released a combat-ready version of the Chameleon with the CLN-7W. In this case, the cooling kit is always going to be double heatsinks. They make sure that they get the right parts here. And you get 9 tons of standard plates for armor, which is quite decent. Your main gun is now an ER large laser, giving you an okay amount of range. You've got that underslung medium laser, and the other arm as a medium pulse laser. The rest of the weapons remain more or less the same. It is a decent enough kit. It's going to be able to fight fairly well, but I've seen them being used as trainer more and more over the years as well. This second upgrade kit for combat with the CLN-7Z, which is rather expensive and turns it into a mid-range brawler. The engine is upgraded to a Vlar 300XL, the kind of stuff that you would see on a Marauder, in order to save a whole lot of weight while making the machine a little, quite a bit more fragile. For weapons, though, you've got an ER large laser in that gun mount, while the underslung lasers are now large lasers. You're going to be the king of mid-range engagements, and you've got an extra double heatsink and a little bit more armor, so you are decently tough, and you're going to be able to stay in the fight decently long. This one here is not going to be used as a trainer just as much because it doesn't really teach you anything. It's meant to get into fights. Later on, we've got an actual Brawler Chameleon with the CLN-8V, which came out in 3086. Get 12 double heatsinks in order to keep the machine decently cool, and it's got all sorts of advanced equipment. The engine as an XL, they probably had an overload of them, or it just was easy to order. And your main gun's that ER large laser backed by a regular medium laser on each arm. I did see a number of them with ER medium lasers as well, but that would make the mech run a little bit hot. The torsos now mount a trio of medium X-pulse lasers and that pair of machine guns with the ammo protected by case 2. You get 9 tons of standard plates, which keeps them safe, but I've also seen quite a few of them being rearmored in ferrofibrous in some of the fancier places. This one I have seen also being used as a trainer. It's a decent enough machine in that range here that it's going to be able to teach people how to use different weapons, different systems, and it's a little bit safer with that case 2 setup. Your mileage may vary. While it's being advertised and being sold to people as a combat mech, the CLN-9V from 3120 is really more meant as a trainer. The main reason for that is that it's actually built out of things that will make it rough and tough and be able to stay around. The chassis is reinforced, meaning that it's quite heavy, but it's able to take quite a beating. And it's also able to be fairly easily repaired or fairly easily maintained, which is quite good on a trainer that you're going to have some people push to the limit. The armor is a little bit limited with 6 tons of heavy ferrofibrous plates. It's not bad, but I do find it a little bit thin, even though it's that really thick type of armor. The engine is a light 300 rather than a standard in an XL, so you have a nice middle ground there, and it's going to be decently survivable. Your arm-mounted weapon is now a light PPC rather than a large laser, and you have a pair of ER medium lasers underslung, which gives you a decent amount of mid-range engagement capability, and it's an okay setup. I am never a huge fan of those light PPCs. If it had a capacitor, maybe it'd be a little bit more interesting. It'd be able to give you a nice amount of punch, but I'm pretty sure a trainee would have no idea how to make a PPC capacitor work properly. Your side torso mount a trio of small X-pulse lasers, some of the best lasers available in the inner sphere armament, and a pair of machine guns with its ammo protected by K2. Once again, the engine is generally mounted with double heatsinks because that's what is shipped to you when you buy a light 300. Very rare that you have a light 300 with standard heatsinks mounted in them to begin with. Many academies keep a lance of a Chameleon on hand to be used as aggressors against their trainees in a bunch of stingers. It really varies here, and I'm pretty sure the Chameleon's going to be around just about forever, unless something really shakes up the market with a better trainer that's able to do all sorts of things. I do know the Hammerhead has been basically advertised for the clans as a standard trainer, but it isn't in production in large enough amounts that people have been able to buy them and put them out. So who knows where things are really going to go, and I'm pretty sure JB, with all their satellite offices and their underwritten kind of things, will be able to keep the Chameleon around for even longer. Many of the modern versions can be used on the front line, but I personally wouldn't recommend it. Those things are meant to be trainers, and the simplification in the cockpit sometimes comes as a detriment for the pilots. And another thing is that everybody's fought Chameleons in the past because, well, you've trained against them or in them. So they're not the best thing to be used because people will know their weaknesses and will know the problems they can have. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.